talking about is your contribution. What's your contribution on the planet here? This is a deep and heavy discussion because it's scary. It's really scary, like that you may not fulfill it, which would be pretty scary because you could get upstairs and find out you didn't do what you came here for, and that'd be a problem. The way I like to put it is every person's born with a hook in his mouth, and you can like hang around the boat. You already got the hook in your mouth, so you're going on the boat. The boat's obviously God, and so you're going on the boat. So you can hang out around the boat. You know, maybe God will throw you a little, fish here and there, and just something to munch on until He reels you in. Or you can run from the boat. God will let you go, because when you're fishing, you can like let line out. You can let all the line out you want. You want to let line out and pretend you're going to somehow win this one. Hook's already in your mouth. You were born with a hook in your mouth. Eventually when you die, He'll reel you in anyway. Now, every person has two major jobs in life. He has the job of being Jewish. Obviously, we're talking about Jews here, but he has the job of being Jewish, and he has the job of being Jewish. And Jewish is what we're talking about when we're talking about contribution. I mean, you can contribute Jewishly, but it has nothing to do with you. It just means saying Amen at the right times, saying Yehei Shmei Rabbah at the right times, making sure you're not doing one of the 39 creative acts on Shabbat. It means saying Baruch Hashem all day long instead of telling people how you're actually doing. It's just the job of a Jew, and it has nothing to do with you. It's generic. You understand? You know why our tzitzis have like the black on them? It has this black here. It's barcode, okay? Just so God knows who's saying Amen at the time, But it's really irrelevant who's actually saying Shmoneh Esrei, meaning who it is, as long as you're saying it. Now, obviously, if you're really into it as an individual and you're like connecting to like God, bring back our exiles from the diaspora. When we say that prayer, if you really connect to that, and you're like thinking about Ben Gurion Airport while you're saying it, and you're like, why is that airport so darn big? That thing's ready for Mashiach. It's like the massive airport for like only a couple planes an hour. And obviously this is about Tekah b'shoifar gadol l'chayr. So if you're really connecting to it, that's beautiful, but it's not that necessary. What's necessary is the words are said. So like, for example, if I'm really not feeling it, Mincha rolls around at 12:30, I might wait, because I got the whole rest of the day to say it till I'm feeling it. But if it turns to be sundown, and it's like I'm still not feeling it, what do? I say it. Because the point is that it gets said. Because the actual mitzvahs themselves have nothing to do with you. They really don't have to do with you. They have to do with Jew. Right? Which for people from Mexico is the same thing. What are you doing, man? So they call you Jew anyway. So. Hey, you guys. So anyway, So you got the Jewish thing, you got the Jewish thing. Now, when God reels you into the boat, so He's got a couple of questions for you. Okay. One of those questions were: did you say Amen at the right time? Did you pray when you're supposed to pray? Did you eat kosher? He's got a bunch of questions that are only about Jewish. Now, there's many guys with the black attitude living in Brooklyn and various other places who, when they get upstairs and God asks them all those questions, they're going to be like, of course I did, that's what I was put here for, no problem. Then they're going to ask another question. They'll say, that's nice, but were you Jewish? Meaning, did you fulfill your specific contribution here? And he's like, I told you already. I said Amen at the right times. I went like this, like no one did this more than me. I was going the pace, moving back and forth. And God's like, I'm going to ask you one more time. Did you get done what you came down for? And if the answer's no, so God pulls the hook out of his mouth and just throws the fish back into the pond. Says, try again. He could even be born a Gentile now because he did the Jewish thing. He fulfilled it. He says he did, maybe he really did, and he's totally done with it, okay? Now, but the opposite's also true. A guy shows up, he's got like, he shows up to God, God reels him in, he's got like a green mohawk. He's got a tattoo that says mom. He's like, he's wearing snakeskin cowboy boots. Like the guy's like so original, if you call that original, but he's like Mr. Jewish, and he held the chairman for 15 years of the Hell's Angel chapter of Albany, New York. Okay, so he's like contribution city, man. This guy is like, he created a whole like 911, but it's like 941 type of emergency rescue for anyone who crashed their Harley. You crash your Harley, once that bike hits the ground, a sensor goes off right to 941. You don't have to call. Okay? It just goes right there, and they come racing over to like GPS right to your bike. They scrape you off the pavement with a special spatula, and a spatula that you funded. That you raised the money for that spatula. The biker spatula. It's more gentle on one's brain. Mr. Contribution shows up, 15 earrings coming down the ear. This guy's like so self-expressed. No one was more Jewish than him. His only problem is that, whatever his name was, Jack Daniel, or something, that they're just like, they bring him out, God reels him in, and they're like, dun, 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 introducing Yaakov Daniel. And he's like, what's Yaakov Daniel? My name's Jack Daniels. And they're like, no, it's not. Your Hebrew name is Yaakov Daniel. You're a Jew. What'd you do about it? And he's just like, huh? What did I do? I didn't know anything about it. And they're like, but you're Jewish. Like they do a calculation of how many Yeheshme Rabbas you should have said, how many Amens you should have said, and all that generic, stuff. How many days of tzitzis, how many days of tefillin with Shema. They go through the whole thing, and Jack Daniels is just like 0. Like, what do you want from me? And so they take the hook out of his mouth and just go back in the pond. Okay. So we have a more difficult task than Gentiles. Gentiles really only have what they're here to contribute. They don't have to deal with this whole other aspect. You guys are here in yeshiva, or you're watching this network or on television or in video form. Obviously you're involved in Jewish study. Otherwise you wouldn't be here right now. But what we're focusing on today is the Jewish aspect. What's your special contribution? Now you're going to notice that you have a direct conflict. And this is why you don't know your contribution and why you asked for the class. See, at your guys' age, you should definitely know what your contribution is already. I mean, think about it. You should know. You have tendencies for it. You have also, there's things that have bothered you about the world that would, like, that feeling when you say, like, what kind of world is this? That's already in you. So you have, like, what to fight for. It's in you already. So why don't you know it already? And the answer is that your contribution's in a direct conflict with something else. And it's called self-image. Self-image is in a direct fight with your contribution. You have to choose. You got to choose. Because self-image does not go well with contribution. It just doesn't go well together. Now, you're probably right now thinking, like, what's he talking about? What do you mean? Like, why would my self-image be in the way of contribution? Well, let's answer that question very simply. Imagine you now knew your special contribution to the planet. You knew your special purpose. What do you got to do? What do you got to do now? You got to do it. Well, what's the potential problem with, from now on, you every day wake up to do your special contribution? What could go wrong? Tell me some of the things that might go wrong. So there's two major issues, and the issues are, I'm going to put them in this order, but it could be another order. Rejection, and the other issue is failure. And that is that people are not going to be that excited about your newfound special purpose that you're like out to like fulfill in the world, to assert in this planet. People aren't going to be that excited about it. And I hate to say this, but most people are governed by the acceptance and the validation, by acceptance and validation of their peers and their family members. I'm going to say that again. Listen carefully. Most people are governed, their daily lives, their goals, their whole, how do you call it? Their aspirations are governed by the validation of their peers and their family members. And the scary thing is, the closer they are to you, the more it's governing. Meaning, do you really care what some acquaintance thinks about what you're up to? You don't care that much. The problem is when it gets closer and closer to you, all the way to like family, friends, siblings, parents, things like that, and it gets closer and closer to best friends, suddenly, like it plays in so big time. In fact, you'll notice in your own Jewish growth that you've probably been thinking since you've been in Israel, or since you've gotten to know the rabbis that you know. You've probably noticed that. We'll just take a little pause till these guys get their seats because we're recording today. You probably have been thinking that what holds you back, because you notice like you're interested in Judaism, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But if you notice, you also have like one foot like dragging behind. You notice that? And you probably think the reason why Judaism is such a big horse pill to swallow is because of the fear of change. But it's not. Your issue isn't a change of lifestyle. Because if you won $1 billion lottery, you'd love it. And so much would change. I mean, 1 million things would change in your life and you'd enjoy every minute of it. Our issue isn't our fear of change. Our issue is our fear of losing our kind of validation circle of our peers and our family members. Meaning what blocks your access to truth and living truth is actually the people who are closest to you. Because without their validation, life seems too scary to live. Which is really wild, because then our access to truth is very limited. To find out anything true and live it with integrity, very hard. And this is the number one thing that gets in the way of our work as rabbis is that we've come to a point where so much of the generation of our Jewish brothers and sisters are not observant at all. So that means that when you're sharing Torah, which is so organic to you, our Torah that we're sharing should be so much more organic than you watching CNN or Fox News or reading the Drudge Report. Right? We should be the most organic thing. We're the most connected and organic and holistic to you by teaching you Torah. Yet everyone has to hear us rabbis with a grain of sand because it might influence you. But who cares if you want it to influence you? It's only making you more organic as a Jew, which means you're more hooked up, more connected, and more like on fire as a human being. But what's in the way is the peers. What will they think of me is the number one question people are asking. Not what does God think of me, not what is true, not what is real, not what is integrity, not what is going to make me more whole in life, but it's what will they think of me? And that's pretty freaky. And it's pretty lame. And by the way, do you become much of a leader for them to ever stand up in their lives? If that's your number one question? No. It's just one giant blanket of mediocrity. One giant blanket of ignorance that remains because it's just one more person saying, I wonder what they'd think of me. You get that? So rejection is the number one thing that gets in the way of our discovering our contribution, because if you discovered your special contribution, I was just doing it in the context of Jewish for a moment, just so you guys really get what I'm talking about. But that's not our subject today. Our subject is actually contribution, which a Gentile, a Jew, it has nothing to do with your Judaism. Okay? It may, my contribution certainly relates, but you should know my contribution is not Judaism. I've contributed a tremendous amount to people's Judaism. That's not what I'm here for. It's not my contribution. I have a totally separate contribution that's not Judaism. And I don't know if you guys even notice it, but I'm always sliding it in under the radar. And it has nothing to do with Judaism, nothing to do with Israel, nothing to do with Torah, nothing to do with any of that stuff. I'm just always sliding it in. It's always sliding it in. And I'm sliding in right now unconsciously. You guys don't even know what it is. But you will know for sure afterwards, when I tell you what it is, you'll know that you've always felt it whenever I'm with you. And because I'm putting it out there, usually with words, but sometimes I'm teaching Torah, so it's not appropriate. And I just put it out there unconsciously. Subliminal vibrations of my special contribution. So, rejection's the main one. The second one is failure. If you're going to contribute something in the world, well, it's going to fail many times. Price for success is failure. Find anyone very successful in life and interview him on how he got his success. I'm talking like top-level successful people. You will find that they failed many times before they got to their success. Have you ever noticed how few seats there are in first class? Have you also noticed that there's usually room there? We have this misconception that like there's a lot of competition at the top. It's not true. The competition's all at the bottom. At the top, there are very few people share that spot. Very few people, because very few people are willing to pay the price for success. And what is the price for success? Failure. Most human beings, they taste it once or twice, they spit it out and never come back. They go try something else. And if that fails, they'll try something else. And if that fails, they'll try something else until they finally make it in something. Most important thing for success, the number one key to success, not the price, the number one key for success is desire. And the way to get to desire is to figure out what it is you really want to succeed in. Once you can pinpoint with single-mindedness, this is what I want, nothing will get in your way. You will fail, but it's got a wedge that will just break through and break through and break through. The path to success, the price of success is all the failures. Most people taste it once or twice and never come back for more. They go to the path of least resistance. And that's everyone fighting over coach. You want to fight over coach? Stick with your current, paradigm of just hitting a wall of failure and just moving to something else. If you want to start sitting in first class, figure out first what it is you want to do. What's your desire? And with that pinpointed, targeted desire, so clear in your mind and in your heart, you start pounding away. And you will pound away and you will break through. You will fail many times. But you got to learn to love the taste of failure. I almost bless you to fail many times so that you get to the top of success. And if don't take my word for it, there's a lot of retired people who made it big, who actually are happy to sit with you. They'll have lunch with you. They'll pay for it. Because once you retire, it doesn't matter how big you are, you feel washed up. It's a psychological thing. You feel washed up. You feel like a has-been. You can't get out of it. It's just the way it is. I always tell people the most important thing is never retire. Because if you retire, you always keep your hand in your business a bit. Like never, even if you sell it, like leave some role you'll play. Because our brains play psychological warfare against us when we retire. And we feel like we're has-beens. So they love to take you out to lunch and tell you how they did it. And I promise you will hear about a lot of failures. But they just kept plugging away. They're not going to stop. Okay? Desire and then plug away. Don't let failure stop you. Okay? Now, why is this in the way of contribution? It's in the way of contribution because self-image is, if I'm a reject and a failure, I lose, right? Your self-image cannot handle rejection, and your self-image cannot handle failures. You get that? And so therefore, it's a lot better to never know what you're here for. Like to never clearly know what you're here for. If you never get your contribution clear, you're a lot safer. And therefore, the first step in discovering your special contribution is to first go to a place which in Hebrew is called bittul, or for us, we're going to call it the nullification of the ego. To get rid of that need to be recognized, that need to have made it, that need that we want to be seen as great, and we want to make sure that we never fail. We got to get rid of the self-image. You'll see the greatest leader who made the greatest contribution on the entire planet was whom? Moses. No one was a greater leader. No one made a greater contribution. And when they referred to Moses, the only character trait we seem to know about Moses, there's only one thing the Torah says throughout the whole Torah about Moses. It says that he was humble. Doesn't say much else. Doesn't say he was smart. Tell that to the Bible critics. They always say the Torah was given by some very smart people. And so and of course, when we learn about Moses, we find out it never mentions once that he was smart. If anything, it mentions he had a speech impediment. So the point for us is that humility is the key. Humility is the key. To generate from no one is a very strange thing I'm telling you, because most people we know who make it out there, or at least the ones that are on the silver screen, or the ones in politics, all the ones that have those big, what are called outer games, all the ones who have those big outer games versus the inner game. All the ones with that big outer game are egomaniacs. They're egomaniacs. And a lot of them just simply die. I mean, who was that guy? Someone just mentioned me outside that I represent the Jewish, what was that guy's name? Patrick Swayze, the Jewish Patrick Swayze. Yeah? Dead. Okay? Anytime I meet a kid who tells me he wants to be a rock star or something, I go onto a website that's how stars die. And it lists their lifespan and how they died. And you can just tape down the scroll button, and it just goes and goes and goes and goes. And you look how long each one lived. It's ridiculously short lives. Because their outer game's gigantic, their inner game is zippo, nothing. No inner world. No inner world. So it's all about, in the end, it's all about this giant ego, this self-image. I mean, when you go to a checkout stand in America, when you go to a checkout stand, it's got magazines just about their private lives. Because do outer games help someone's family life? Someone has a big outer game, they're going to have a good family life? No. What determines how good your inner game is with your spouse and your children is your inner game. Good inner game, good family life, good children. Lame inner game with a big outer game, you're throwing them to the dogs. And they have magazines just about these people. But we're fooled. We're all fooled into believing that someone who's got really big ego is how you make it, when it's the opposite is true. And why do they die so young? How come they're always choking on their own vomit on some overdose? The answer is that after all the ego and all the attention, because it's really all about attention, when the attention goes away and it's now 3 a.m, and whoever they brought home that night's fast asleep, there's no one clapping anymore. And when that vacuum of attention, it's just a giant vacuum now of attention. And it's usually on the night of their biggest show or their biggest concert or their biggest something, biggest game in sports. When that vacuum of attention sets in, they have to numb it. And they're used to numbing it. But eventually they numb it with the wrong combination, and they also couldn't sleep, so they took something to sleep as well. Gone. One after the other after the other. Big outer game, no inner game. When we're about self-image, it's all outer game. Moses represents inner game. Moses represents having a powerful inner game. And having a powerful inner game means you generate from no one. From no one. I generate from no one. That's the place to be. And think about it. Every one of you, think about it right now. When's the happiest you ever were in your whole life? Your happiest time. I bet you all have it in common. In fact, I went somewhere, I traveled to a place where I found the happiest people. The happiest people I ever met. Yeah. It just so happens that every one of them was under the age of 3. The happiest you ever were in your life was when you were under 3, you were a toddler. You didn't care a thing about what anyone thought. You better hope your mom didn't get a phone call while she was changing your diaper in the middle of a family party. Because you go down and sing a song and do a little dance for everybody. Yeah. So you didn't care. You loved like you never have loved since. When you were upset, you cried. You had your own wash cycle for your emotions. When's the last time you cried when you're upset? We do the opposite. We stuff it down until we just become shells of men. So afraid of our emotions. I mean, don't we all know deep down, don't we all know that the valve for joy is the same valve for pain? If you want to lock your pain down, don't expect a lot of joy in life. It's the same valve. It's called the emotions. Because joy is an emotion and pain is an emotion. They share the same valve. You can't lock one down and expect to have the other. But when you were that toddler, if you were upset, whoa, everybody knew it. You know? And 1 minute later, you could be like ecstatically happy. Why? Because you already washed. You washed the emotions clean. And now you're totally happy. All in the span of 1 minute. No one calls you bipolar. Energy, endless energy. You ever seen the toddler go? From the time he wakes up till he passes out. It's so cute when they pass out on the floor. They don't stop. Think how old we are already compared to that. We're like old sedentary, geriatric people in our 20s compared to that. And how about the fear of failure? How many times did you try to stand and keep landing right back on your bum? How many times did you try? Or did you try once or twice and you say like, I can't do it. I'll find something else to do. No, you just kept trying and trying and trying. And once you finally got it, what did you do? Boom. And you just kept trying and trying and trying because there was no self-image. You get that? There is no self-awareness for a toddler. That only comes after 3 years old. There's no self-awareness. You are awareness itself, pure awareness. And it's the happiest you ever were. So we're all just chasing after the wrong stuff in life. We're avoiding our contribution. We are worrying mostly about rejection and failure because we're always on the self-image side of the board. We're glorifying people with big outer games. We're thinking that if our ego is just stronger, somehow we'll succeed more. And we keep thinking we have to be someone. When in fact, when we were no one, we were the happiest we ever were. Full of energy, willing to fail 1,000,000 times till we succeed. Our paradigms are all messed up, and the Torah is teaching us from Moses that if you want to be the greatest, you be the humblest. You pay the price of self-image for contribution, because it's just a price you pay. If you want the contribution, you pay with self-image. I would gladly let it go. Gladly let go of the self-image. I'd gladly pay with self-image for contribution, because contribution's power. I don't mean ego power. I'm saying like feeling powerful life, like you make a difference. Something worth going to bed for and something worth waking up for. Right? Because you know what you're living for. In fact, it's even said that it's the most important decision of your life, what you're here for. I know our parents tell us the most important decision of our life is who you marry, right? That's what they'll say. I mean, it could be if your parents recently immigrated, so it's how you make a living. But the next generation at least tells their kids the most important decision they make is who they marry. In some, it's how you make a living, but it's a disservice. The most important decision you ever make in your life is what your life's for. What are you about? Then it's so much easier to find a spouse because you marry someone who says, I get that. I get that for you. I'm into that. Me too. So like you'd never ever marry someone who doesn't agree with your, contribution. You'd never marry someone who doesn't say, yeah, me too, that's my thing as well. But what do people do instead? They never figure out their contribution. They date for looks and financial stability and whatever they date for. The men for looks, the girls for financial stability. They marry. And now he can never ask that question. Because how can he ask, what's my special contribution? What if she doesn't want it? What if she doesn't like it? Is he willing to let go of everything now? At least while you guys are single, you can ask that question. You can't ask it later. And that's why it's so important. It's the most important question is, what are you here for? What's your special contribution? So there are 4 steps in discovering your special contribution. And those 4 steps are as follows. Number 1 is to get rid of self-image, is to generate from no one. Right? Remember we spoke about Moses? Yeah? It's just be willing to pay. Be willing to pay with your self-image to have your contribution. Break off your rear view mirror and throw it out the window and just put the pedal to the metal. Okay? Meaning break off that mirror that's constantly looking over your shoulder. What do people think of you? And stop that. It's literally got you in a straitjacket. Break off the rear view mirror and just generate from no one. Okay? Is that clear? And after all, it was the happiest you ever were, so it's only going to bring more joy. Number 2 is, so that was 1, is generate from no one. Number 2 is you got to figure out what bothers you. What bothers you? The only problem you're going to be willing to solve is the one that bothers you. And we all hear causes all the time, but it doesn't necessarily ignite you. It doesn't inspire you to make a difference. I'm sure every one of us in here doesn't like dolphins getting caught in, tuna nets, right? I think it bothers all of us. Who wants to see those pictures of like the dolphin caught in the tuna net and all dead like that, But, so do you guys put the buck inside the little thing, save the dolphins? You guys put the buck? Some put it, some don't. But it's only going to hit you if it's the thing that bothers you. So some people are like, wow, I'm getting involved. We're going to save the dolphins, from the tuna net. You got to figure out what bothers you. Every contribution is championed by the people who it bothers them. And the question is, what bothers you? You got to figure out what bothers you. And something bothers every one of you. I promise you, if you think about it, you'll spend time thinking of it. And we won't do it right now, but you're going to think about it. What has always bothered you about this world? Probably since you were a kid. It's probably since you were a kid. For some people, it might be ignorance. Others, illiteracy. For some people, it might be a lack of justice. For others, it might be judgment, like people judging one another. A lack of unity. A lack of care. There's all kinds of things that might bother you. And you got to figure out what bothers you. You hear that? So you want to think about that. What's always bothered me since I'm a kid? Because you're only going to fight for something that bothers you. You will not fight for something that doesn't bother you. Clear? And there are actually people who have a Jewish contribution because what bothers them is Jewish illiteracy or, things like that. I have a feeling a lot of your rabbis that you meet, Jewish illiteracy bothers them. And so they're fighting for Jewish literacy. They'll wake up every day for it. Paid, not paid, they'll keep fighting for it. Okay? Number 2 is, that's number 2. Number 3 is your applicable skill. Your applicable skill. Every person has been granted certain skills. I was granted the skill of speaking. Ever since I'm little, I've almost never read a book. I should not have this vocabulary. I'm not a reader. It's not my thing. But I've been given the gift of speaking and music. And so I speak and I play music, and that's my special skill. I apply it, and I know what bothers me. Generate from no one. Know what bothers me. I apply the skill. So you want to think, what is your applicable skill? Are you a good networker? Are you good at writing? Maybe you're good at music. Maybe you're good at graphic design. Maybe you're good at business. Maybe you're good at accounting. It's got to be some kind of skill that you can apply to it. And it might be accounting. And you say, how am I going to use accounting for my special contribution? Well, if dolphins bother you getting caught in nets, you call them and you say, what's going on with your accounting? And they're like, oh gosh, we're like on our 4th accountant already. And you say, you know what, I'm a very successful accountant. I actually run an accounting firm, and I'm going to dedicate 2 hours a day, at least until I get your numbers back together. I'll dedicate 2 hours a day, and from now on, I'll just at least oversee your accounting to make sure dolphins stay out of the nets. Yeah. And so it doesn't matter what your applicable skill is. You can be in some part of it. By the way, you notice how you don't have to be the guy with the megaphone? You can just be the accountant. You can do anything. You can have it be during your lunch break on Wednesdays. Your lunch break on Wednesdays, you work on a website. You just do some work on a website, research for them on that particular contribution. There's a high-level chance that there's some people already contributing that contribution. They're already championing that cause. And so you're just joining ranks with them. Just want to say one thing, though. If you don't find a lot of people doing that particular contribution, and you're so dedicated that you're willing to do it full-time, don't pay for it yourself. Raise the funds. Raise the funds. You will find the money. How are you going to find the money? Very simply. You'll find the money because you'll ask one guy and he'll say, like, listen, man, that's not my cause. He'll give you $18. Okay. Next door, obviously you're not going door to door, but call the next guy who you had a lead with. He says, great cause, not my thing, but just give me the address. Email me the address. I'll send something. Okay. Strike two. Strike two. He sent you $180. Not going to pay for the staplers, for the offices. So but eventually you will hit this guy. You'll call him up. You'll make a meeting with him, and you get together. And he's like, "You got to be kidding!" And you're like, "No, really. This is what I do." And he's like, "You got to see my journal from university days, like 30 years ago. This is all I cared about." And you're like, "Wow." Well, here I am. I'm your guy, And the guy's like, 5 years from now, you're going to be honoring me at the banquet. And you're like, great. But you will strike gold. You will strike gold because there's only so many contributions on the planet. And it's just a matter of time before you find the guy who's been working all his life. He's not going to be interested in doing it, but he will be interested in paying for it. So if you're so dedicated to a cause, and there are people like that, so dedicated that it's not going to be just lunch breaks or things you do after dinner, but it's going to be something that you actually want to do full time, don't pay for it yourself. There are enough people making money out there. Let them pay for it. Okay. And anyway, everyone has to give money in life. Like wealthy people have to give a certain amount of their income. So let them give it towards your contribution, if that's your thing. If your thing's to do it full time. We had that whole long discussion about the self-image. And then we spoke about Moses, just like no self-image. He was pure contribution. He was pure dedication to the cause. Okay, he didn't care about what anyone thought of him. I'm leading you out of Egypt, and I don't care what you think. And people were giving him a hard time. The whole time there, he was getting hassled by the Jews. And Moses just like, you can hassle me, but there's no me here that you're hassling. There is no me. So do what you want. I'm never going to stop leading the Jews to the promised land. And number 4, and finishing with number 4, is the concise declaration of your contribution. The concise declaration of your contribution, and that is you get it down to one word, like give it a .com. Just give it a .com so you make it short. You need it to be concise. You know why? Because the self-image is going to have real short attacks to stop you. So you need to have a short response. You can't have some long-winded, contribution. It's got to be very short, very clear. Like .coms. They generally tell you what they do when you read the actual URL. It tells you right away what it's about. So you need to make it nice and short. So you start with no one. You say, forget the self-image. I'm not worrying about what anyone thinks, and I'm not going to worry about how many times it will fail, because it will fail many times. Then I'm going to figure out what has always bothered me about this world. What applicable skills have I been given? Then I apply the applicable skill to what bothers me. And somewhere you'll get an angle of how to approach that contribution. And then from that, you can then create the solution. And then the rest of your life, this is your contribution to the planet. Which again, it can be either a full-time thing, or it can be just something that you do, on the edges of life. A little before work, maybe during lunch, something you do at night. You certainly send your charity that way, help support it, show up at their functions, get more people involved. And that's basically, then you declare it. So it can be any type of contribution. So let's say someone, what always bothered them was illiteracy, and their applicable skill is networking. They're really good at networking people. Okay, so their concise declaration could be read.com or literacy.com, something like that. Read is a little shorter. Read.com, make it really short. And now they're going to be networking. That's their special skill. They're going to apply their networking skills to literacy organizations are now having a nice flow of donors, let's say, to their organization, because this person's a great networker, and they're just going to constantly be networking people that way. Or they're networking people to become literacy teachers who donate their time towards helping kids learn reading in schools. So that'd be like something like read.com. Hear that? Hear that? That's just an example. So I'll share what mine is. Mine is, what's always bothered me in life is people not caring for each other. I can't take it when people don't care. I almost crash my bike every time I see a bus driver not letting someone on the bus when they're like banging on the glass. He's got to let him on the bus. I can't breathe until he lets him on the bus. Another person watches and is just kind of interesting, like, oh, let's see if he lets him on or not. Everyone wants to watch. But for me, I can't breathe. He's got to let him on that bus. He's got to care. He's got to realize this guy's got to get somewhere. He's got to empathize and realize he's got to let him on. And this always bothered me my whole life. My applicable skill is teaching and music, playing music. And you will find that I'm always giving care.com. And even though I'll be teaching a Torah class, that doesn't even bring it in. By the way, I segue most of the time towards caring. I'll segue a class right there. But even if I don't, like this class I didn't, but you'll notice when I'm with you guys, do you notice that there's a unique care that's coming through from me to you? Yeah, and I'm also interested that people are caring for each other. Please move over a few seats so the next guy can slide in. You notice that? It's all let's make it easier for people to sit down. So we're being more caring, and people are less embarrassed when they walk in the room. They don't have to slide through. There's a seat waiting for them. Because I care about people being embarrassed walking in a room. Care.com. Okay. Shalom, everybody. Okay.